Fatheads, welcome to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings, episode 15, Tea Time, quite. Now, normally you'd see me and my normal guest host, Rob, but today we've got a special guest host, the original guest host, MFN CEO, Logan.
Fucking OG gangster, bitches. I'm back. And see, it's the thing, is I helped the show get off the ground, and then I realized that I don't drink enough to actually do a pairing show, and the one thing I do drink an excessive amount of is black teas. And guess what? We're going all British today. We're sticking our pinkies out and we're pairing with teas, so I'm back.
Hells yeah.
I'm here to assist.
So, why don't we kick it off and just talk a little bit about what you got in the lineup here? What do you got going on?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's kind of weird though. I mean, and I don't know, I mean, maybe it is for, someone up in Canada land. But U.S., I mean, people drink a lot of teas, but it's more of the sweet tea variety, right? There's not a lot of people that drink a lot of teas, and we can talk about different types of teas and stuff, but where I started drinking a lot of tea is I go to India, obviously, a lot for work, and, kind of much like the British, the water's not necessarily safe to drink over there, so what I do is I boil it, and I drink a lot of tea, and tea is freaking everywhere. So, that's kind of how I got into it. So what I'm actually smoking today, I'm smoking the Illusion Ultra, which is actually the strongest cigar that Illusion's put out to date, or at least I think so.
Nice pick.
Yeah, no, it's a freaking great cigar. Box press uses a decent amount of Ligero, and it's definitely, Illusion is more, I would say, Cuban-esque Nicaraguans, and it's definitely a departure of that. It's very much kind of a kick-in-your-face type of cigar, and I really enjoy it. But what I'll be pairing it with, I've actually got 3 different teas. And I only drink black tea, so I don't get into the green stuff or oolongs or whites or herbals or any of that crap. I only drink black tea. And I could have picked a lot of different stuff, and I hope we didn't pick the same stuff, but I picked out a couple of my favorites. One is, the first cup is a cup of Darlinging from Twinnings. Next one is Earl Grey, and there's a specific reason I actually picked Earl Grey with some of the flavorings that it uses. And then also, in the biggest cup, because it's my favorite black tea, is some Sri Lankan, a.k.a. Ceylon tea, which is by far my favorite black tea.
Well, I went a different direction altogether, so I think this is going to work out really nicely. I considered, I have an Illusione 4.2, and I've been dying to smoke it. I've been dying to smoke it on the show, but I just can't quite fit it in. And I think the teas I have today are on the opposite spectrum of what you've got. They're a little bit more subtle. So I'll just bang through it. First of all, Herrera Esteli Lonsdale. I can't say enough about this cigar. It was embarrassing to me that I didn't have it on my review list last year because I smoked a ton of these. This would have been in my top 10 last year without a doubt. I had the opportunity to smoke this. I think I was maybe amongst the first regular people to smoke this when I was down at the Cigar Safari last year, sitting at a table with Big Cuba, the man himself, Lee Herrera, smoking the Lonsdale. I ended up smoking all the Vitolas. The Lonsdale was absolutely my favorite. It's very Cuban-esque. It's got some floral content to it, which normally not really my style, but totally fits in with what we're talking about today. So in terms of tea, I kind of went in the opposite spectrum. I've got almost entirely Chinese teas.
Yeah.
So
do you have that oolong schlang stuff?
Well, I'll bang through it here.
That shit is disgusting.
I got some really interesting stuff. So I got a Tiquan Yin, which is an oolong. I've got a Genmasha green, which is actually a Japanese green tea, and I'm going to love talking about this tea because it is fantastic. And I'm not a tea guy. I'm a coffee guy. Tea is like a new thing to me. I've got a Golden Pure Black, and there's an interesting story behind black teas and red teas and whatever, but we'll talk about that later. And last but not least, I've got a Lapsang Souchong Star, which
is the fucking vile. I've got it back. Oh, sorry. Anyways.
No, and your reaction is exactly the reaction I expected, because I've already kind of cheated and I sampled this, and this is to tea as an Islay whiskey is to whiskey. people either love it or they hate it, and there's like nobody in between.
Oh God. I mean, I've got a bag of it, and just so you know, like, there's really, and I think most people know this, but there's really two forms that tea come in, and if you say that instant tea is an option, then you're just a fucking idiot, because that does not work. You've got your options where you've got your preset bags. So if you're kind of on the go, it's kind of like, think of it as this is kind of the Keurig option, right? You've got your little bag, you steep it, whatever. More expensive. What I like to do is I go to nuts.com, and I wish they were a sponsor because I'm going to throw them a shout out here, is you can buy loose leaf tea, pretty high quality. You can get 4 ounces for $5. So when you look at the difference of 20 bags versus this, you're talking you get like a 10-to-1 ratio with this, and then you have to get something to actually steep the tea with, right? Or steep the tea with. And here's what I like to use. I like to call him my walking man.
Nice.
And you can actually take off his little bottom part here, and you fill in all the tea. I've already obviously made a cup, but you fill him in, let him steep. It works really, really well. So, but it's funny that you actually picked this tea surgeon, because when I open up the bag, and the other reason I like to get the bags of tea is because they seal up really nice. You don't have to worry about any air getting into them. Because tea will last for black tea specifically will last. China black teas will last the longest, but black teas in general, as long as they're sealed, will last 2 to 3 years. But I love just getting a nose of this. And when you smell this, you're kind of like, whoa, this smells like different than any other tea that I've ever smelled in my life. And it's almost kind of got like a mesquite-y kind of hickory kind of barbecue note to it when you smell it. But when you drink it, like when I smelled it the first time, I was like, man, like this is like barbecue tea. This is going to be freaking sweet. But then when you drink it, I'll let Surgeon tell you about how it tastes when you drink it. But anyways.
So, I found, because obviously I love to research shows, I love to research the stuff and learn new things, and I kind of knew that tea, or had a presumption that tea originated from China. I had no idea. Tea is 4,000 years old, and they were brewing tea like at 2,800 BC. Like,
they were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, China, if you look at exports of tea, China is obviously the heaviest, followed by India. And then over the last few years, Chinese exports have increased, but Indian exports are getting fairly close to them. And it's interesting because tea was kind of an unknown thing. It's been in China forever, like you're right, 4,000 years. But really the insurgence of tea really made, once they kind of opened up the Silk Road and, opened up the Silk Road and was trading out west, because a lot of, for example, British really made kind of the tea, and this is actually an interesting story, is that British kind of made the tea much more mainstream because obviously water in London and around the UK was not safe at that point. Well, drinking just boiled hot water tastes like crap. So They found, at that time they were in India, and a lot of the tea seeds, it's very interesting because a lot of the tea plants and tea trees, when you have like an Assam tea or a Darjeeling and a lot of those are much like Cuban, and it relates to the cigar industry because a lot of the seeds that you smoke from Nicaragua are Cuban seed. Well, a lot of the teas that you're drinking from India and other places are Cuban or Chinese tea like seeds that have grown from those plants, just grown in those regions. But the British made it very, very popular, and obviously one of the reasons that they went to India is because of the prime growing conditions, and Sri Lanka as well, and Kenya, and some other places, because it grows tea very, very, very well.
So I learned that there are sort of 6 core tea varieties.
Can I try to guess?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, there's black.
Yep.
And then the Chinese, there's black and red, but you can get into that. Yep. Then there's whites, there's herbals, there's greens, there's oolongs, and then I think that's it actually.
Yellow,
yeah, but that doesn't even really count. I've never had a yellow tea. So
I'm totally gonna get into the Chinese red tea, North American black tea, because it's an interesting topic. But I'm gonna talk a little bit about this oolong. I'm not a tea guy. I'm a huge coffee guy. The amount of coffee I have and coffee equipment I have, I could start my own coffee company. But the girlfriend is huge into tea. It's all loose leaf because you're a Neanderthal if you don't brew tea loose leaf. It's like long filler tobacco versus short filler tobacco. It's just totally different. I actually got some of those little disposable. They're almost like a sackcloth mini tea bags, perfect
Like the
for
little muslin
yeah.
size, yeah, absolutely.
I don't normally like a lot of teas. I'm normally a black tea kind of guy. So this oolong that I've got is actually really interesting. It's not very strong. It's not very fruity. It's almost like a lighter version of a green tea. So on its own, it's very soft and subtle, and that's why I put it sort of first. But I'm already halfway down the cup. I'm enjoying it. It's actually a nice pairing with this Herrera. It would be blown out completely if you had a strong Maduro, anything that's maybe medium full body would just blow this tea out. But they actually pair well together. The oolong doesn't really doing anything for the cigar, but it's not taking anything away from the cigar. So it complements.
Cool. I mean, the other thing that I think is interesting about oolong versus whites versus yellows, greens, teas is the temperature at which you actually boil them, right?
Oh.
And oolong, for example, what you're drinking, you actually don't boil the water. If you boil it, you'll actually scorch the shit out of it.
That's right.
And if you drink a white tea, I mean, you're getting up to 150 degrees, so obviously you'd still burn your hand. The black is really the only one that you're going to get up to boiling.
Mm-hmm.
And you're obviously the kind of you go whites to yellows to greens to oolongs to blacks. The more you go, the higher the temperature goes, but also it goes into how long you actually steep the tea as well to get out a lot of the aroma and complexity out of it into the water. So.
And it's interesting because the preparation of the tea leaf, there's a lot of variety there, and it really falls into, and again, when I was reading this, it was
very similar to tobacco, isn't it?
So similar.
It's so similar, exactly.
It was like the primings, which leaf you choose. So they really have, and think of it like aging tobacco. You've got oxidation, which is just essentially aging a leaf, and the level of oxidation determines really how strong it is. So the more you oxidize it, the more sort of black tea-ish it becomes. The oolong, interesting, is almost like it's kind of between a Maduro and a Connecticut, because it's really under the sun. Like you literally wither the tea plant, and then you oxidize the snot out of it, but not as much as a black tea. And yet, because it's been under the sun and withered so much, it isn't really tannic. It's actually very subtle and light, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And tannic is a great word that I was going to talk about, because as you kind of go up the scale to black teas, they become more and more tannic and more as in kind of have an astringent type property to them. And I can see how people don't like that, but when it comes to cigars specifically, it's why when I do reviews and I not just, hey, I'm smoking a cigar, barbecuing, whatever with the beer, but when I want to actually fully enjoy a cigar and not have my beverage, mess with it at all, I drink teas, because the black teas have kind of an astringent palate cleaning quality to them. And the more and more that you oxidize, aka what I would call, ferment, the more and more of that astringent quality that you actually have. So it's kind of interesting. I'm drinking the Darjeeling tea, actually from West Bengal, India, which you probably have no freaking clue where that is. All you need to know is it's close to the Himalayas. Darjeelings I really like, and it would be a tea that I would recommend to someone who isn't necessarily a huge tea drinker, because it's honestly kind of a combination of an oolong, or however you say oolong, and then you have a black tea, because really black teas are 100% oxidized, meaning that they've been fermented 100%, where the Darjeelings don't. Typically they're not all the way, so it's technically actually more of an oolong, but it is a black tea. And I like it because it has almost kind of a champagne-y kind of floral. If you look at the color, which I can't really show you, it actually would have been smart if I had clear glasses, now that I think about it. But it's almost a lighter color coming out, and you definitely get a lot of floral. It's kind of almost champagne-like in nature. You get a little bit of that astringent property, and it's a really good tea that if you're not a huge tea drinker, you can do it and enjoy it. What I would compare the oolong to, and first of all, it actually does nothing with this. It's actually a really bad combo with this. This is pretty light, and this is pretty strong, and I'm not really getting much out of this. I like to think a Darjeeling, I would say, would complement pretty well with more of probably milder to medium body and strength cigars. I think, and one of the best pairings I ever had with Darling was actually a 4 Kicks, and it worked fucking beautifully. So that would be probably something that I would look at. But yeah, Darling's is actually a really, really great tea to look at.
So I'm going to hop right into my second tea because I've just been powering through this too long, and I'm going to be just jittery as heck at the end. So this is a Genmatcha green. It has minimal oxidation. It's a Japanese green tea, and what's interesting to me, because I like green tea. Green tea is really good, but sometimes green tea I find is too acidic. And what's interesting is they actually put roasted brown rice in with this tea to prepare. Yeah, it's wild. It gives it this sort of earthy and more of a hearty undertone. So, sort of to bring it back to tobacco, it brings the body, because green teas don't have a lot of body. They're very light, very acidic, and this brings it to sort of a medium body, which is really interesting to me because it cuts the acidity off, gives it this medium earthy brownness to it. What's curious is that, of course, Japan is really, really well known for the green tea. Like green tea in Japan is really, they just call it tea. It's not green tea. When you order tea in Japan, you get a green tea because that's culturally what they drink. And they've apparently had tea since Chinese Song Dynasty back in 1200 AD. Japan has just gone nuts over green tea, and they've got like green tea in their food. They've got green tea in their ice cream and the desserts, like nuts. But 80.8% of the world's green tea comes from China. Yep. Only 9.5% comes from Japan, because I mean China owns tea. Like they are the kings when it comes, like literally that's their product. Like tea is absolutely Chinese. Like so much of their provinces are dedicated to tea production. But this product, I should say, the girlfriend picked wisely, is very Japanese, and like I said, it's heartier, and I love this tea. Like this is going to become sort of a good afternoon weekend tea for me because I just love the body of this tea.
So you brought up kind of an interesting point, is that I don't know if you've seen this, but I one of the things that people do, and we're drinking obviously the black teas, right? Well, at least the black teas I'm drinking straight. But you'll notice what a lot of people will do, especially British people, and people in India, is they'll actually put a lot of milk in their tea.
Yeah.
And one thing I would caution against is, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, but for some reason, I don't know why, is that where do you put in first, the tea or the milk? And I have always found that if you have boiling hot tea and then pour in milk, it's not quite as good as if you put in milk and then pour in a little bit of the tea and gradually allow the milk to warm up. I don't know, and I'm not like a scientist by any stretch, but I don't know if it's the properties of the milk changing in a different way. I think it's a little more robust, but I would definitely say when you're adding milk to a tea, it's one, to kind of cool it down, but two, it adds a little bit more creaminess to it, and kind of levels it out. It's really good for very dark black teas, like Ceylon and stuff like that, but creamy. But if you were to add milk to a white tea and stuff, honestly, you're just wasting your fucking time. I don't think that works at all. But anyways, go ahead, Surgeon. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, man, it's good. I mean, this is a really interesting topic. I can't believe we haven't had tea on before this, and I think we're gonna have to have another tea show on. I have done all of my teas straight. Normally, when I drink a black tea, I might add a little bit of honey just to cut out the acidity, but I'm finding that really that just comes down to brew time and extraction time for the tea. So these were both done at 4 minutes. I think it's perfect. Any more on this green tea, and it become way too acidic. This is a really good pairing. Believe it or not, I think it's on par with the first pairing, which surprised me because I figured this would be much better with that brown rice sort of heartiness to it. This is a great afternoon tea. Like this this like a medium-bodied, not very peppery stick goes just fantastic with this green tea. I'm digging it for sure.
So, I mean, to draw kind of a parallel, is that as you have black teas, think about that as kind of purely. I mean, it's been fermented, very fermented and cured tobacco. Where when you have greens and whites, they're the ones that haven't been oxidized or cured 100%. and why you get some of those, like you were saying, some of that lighter flavor out of it. And it's really interesting, actually, about tea trees. And I actually looked in, and I don't know if there's any truth to this, but I mean, tea grows kind of all around the world, but apparently in like hardiness zones 8, 9, 10, it seems to grow the best, which is, if you think about it, it's kind of India, China, then you go down south, you're talking like Kenya, Japan, places like that, right? So, I mean, I would be very curious, because really what a tea is, I've always thought, until I kind of got educated, because I visited a tea plantation when I was in India, is I always thought it was like these little shrubs, and it is, but really a tea plant is a big-ass tree. Like, it can grow 50, 60 feet tall. But what they do, much like a tobacco plant, is they prime it down, and so they get much like a priming on a tobacco plant, right, where you have the stronger leaves. The more you prime and prime, you put more and more of the concentration of the nicotine and flavors up top. Exactly the same thing with tea plants, is they trim them back where they're easier to pick and easier to deal with, and they prime the leaves off in kind of different primings to get different levels of flavor. And I've actually I don't even know if this would be possible, but I love, and the other thing about tea trees, they'll grow 50 feet tall if you don't mess with them. Well, obviously, you don't want to do that, but it takes several years for it to even bear fruit or bear the leaves that you can harvest. So to get a tea plantation, it's much like a winery, where you might have several years where you're just caring for things before it even is ready to produce and you make any money out of it.
That's going to be a really tough startup business.
It is.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, and I just want to clarify, because when I was reading about tea preparation, is the difference between oxidation and fermentation. And you kind of mentioned them as synonymous. And what's interesting is they're actually not synonymous.
Really?
Yeah. So oxidation, it's just adding oxygen and essentially just
letting it dry.
Letting it dry, letting it age.
Is curing.
But fermentation is more along the lines of what you do to a Maduro wrapper. So the last tea I'm going to be drinking is a heavily fermented. I might actually get that backwards. Sorry. The next tea I'm going to be drinking is a heavily fermented tea, and what that means is, like a Maduro wrapper, there's microbial action on it, which darkens it, which actually, it's literally like brewing, where the microbes are acting on the leaf and causing it to actually change. So there is a little bit of oxidation there, but it's fermentation. And it's a very different smelling tea. It's not like the last one I'm going to drink, which is a smoked. It's a very smoky tea. But I could see that a fermented tea might not be everyone's quote unquote cup of tea.
Right.
Because you ferment something, you're going to get a really, really different flavor from it that people might not be used to, because it's an odd process.
Right. Well, now we talk about odd processes in tea. So, first of all, we're talking about maybe 6 teas. I mean, off the top of my head, we're missing Irish breakfast, English breakfast, Kenyan, Russian, Nigerali, or however you say it, Assams, which are one of my favorite. There's a lot of teas that we're missing right now. We'll have to have another show. But there's one that I picked that's pretty fairly popular, I think, and maybe you haven't heard of it. But and we have more teas coming.
Thanks.
So there's the puer. Do you want me to take the other 2 for you? No. Oh, here.
Hi, tea servant.
That's my tea helper right there.
That's our tea servant. So.
Yep.
I only had 3 teas. I didn't come with 4 like Surgeon. But the second one that I got was, it's called Earl Grey. And I'm sure that people have probably heard about it. But with Earl Grey, it's actually fairly, at least in my head, it's an interesting tea for a couple reasons. Because really what Earl Grey tea is a black tea. And it can be kind of a combination of, and Twinings does it a little bit different than... and by the way, if you didn't know this, when you go to the store and you see kind of bags of tea that are kind of pre-done, they're typically going to fall with one of 2 companies. And yeah, you'll see Tazo and all this new hipster shit. But if you're going old school companies that have been in Britain and been in India for 500 years or 400 years, you're going to see a couple. You're going to see Twinings, which is my personal favorite, or you're going to see Bigelow. And they do... And it's kind of interesting because if you get a kind of, for me at least, and it's the same thing with tobacco, is that you can use, I mean, I'll get an Earl Grey, or excuse me, I'll get like an English breakfast between Bigelow and Twinings, and I think Twinings is 1,000 times better, but I think Bigelow does a better job with their Darlinging. So even between brands, teas are completely different because they're grown in different, maybe the same region, but on a different side of a hill or a different farm, so they're going to be a little bit different. So just because you like Darlingings doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to like ones from both of those brands. That's just something kind of adds a little bit of fun to it to try different brands. But the reason I select the Earl Grey is because it's a black tea, and it's kind of a mixture of different black teas, but it actually is flavored. And it's kind of an interesting thing. It's actually, when you smell the bag, and another reason I like loose leaf tea is when you get like, you just nose the bag, it's like very, very citrusy, very, very floral, and it almost doesn't smell right. And basically what Earl Grey tea is, it's flavored with, and I'm going to butcher this name, but it's called bagamont or bergamot, and it's basically a fruit, a fragrant fruit. It's about the size of an orange, and it's yellow, that really, it grows in the south of Italy and the south of France, that adds kind of that floral, and they use the oils from it, and it actually kind of almost flavors the tea, and it gives you kind of that citrusy, you know, kind of orangey type notes in the tea that are not very, that are actually not, whatever, like kind of not natural to a tea flavor, except for teas from China. And I was reading, and I didn't know this, but I did some research, and apparently there was a big court case in like London in like 1800s where a lot of the really high-end Chinese teas, and we'll actually talk probably more about this when Surgeon talks about the difference between China, but between black teas and red teas. But those teas do have kind of that citrus kind of natural notes. And there's a big court case, it was people were passing this quote-unquote, you know, Earl Grey tea off as a Chinese tea, and they were saying that they were flavoring it, right? So it's a really good tea. I love Earl Grey is one of my favorites to actually use with milk, because when you add that kind of the milky creaminess with those floral notes, it's actually very, very pleasurable. Between the Darjeeling and the Assam that I'm going to drink, it's probably in the middle in terms of body and strength. I mean, I think it's just an all-around good tea. I can drink it in the mornings. I can drink it in the evenings. The only reason I wouldn't drink it is that I believe that the bergamot oil, when I pair it with cigars, it kind of, you lose that astringent property, so it kind of almost f's up your palate a little bit and kind of almost coats your palate a little too much. As I'm smoking this and drinking this, it's not a good pairing. I've really not found an Earl Grey that goes well with the cigar, just because of that kind of infusion, right? It would be like if I was trying to drink a beer and then smoke a flavored cigar. You know, obviously that flavored cigar is going to affect the beer probably in an unnatural way, at least for me. So Earl Grey is a great tea, but I don't recommend pairing it with anything. That's just me.
MFNCO dropping some tea knowledge nukes there. You're listening to Sharing Our Pairing, episode 15, Tea Time Quite. We're going over a bunch of teas. First of all, for those listening around the world, probably listening to this near around Remembrance Day or Veterans Day if you're in the U.S. Just want to say thank you to all our veterans out there. Thank you to all the families who have sacrificed. Today I'm wearing my poppy, which is a little askew, but the poppy is the Canadian symbol for our veterans on Remembrance Day.
I know.
It comes from World War I, Flanders Field, and we wear it as a symbol. Everyone wears it as a symbol to recognize and thank our veterans and the veterans who have laid down their lives. So a little bit of a somber note there, but I feel that it's really important to recognize our veterans. On a more serious or less serious note, thanks very much to our podcast listeners. You guys getting some love out there. Thanks very much to our live listeners, although not sure how many live listeners we have here on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, probably not many. I don't know. You can see in the little window at the bottom. How many do you have?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. All right.
So I'm moving on to, and we'll get into the heart of this. I'm going on to my Puer, which is massacring the name of it, which is a Chinese black tea. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about red tea, black tea. So what the rest of the world considers to be a black tea, Western tea, Chinese culture refers to that as a red tea because the color of it is red. What Chinese refer to as a black tea is this pu'er, which is we were talking a little bit earlier about this sort of heavily fermented tea, and they often drink it as a digestif after a meal. It's supposed to aid with digestion. Now,
Yep.
they don't really drink it as much as they export it. Interestingly enough, it's not very highly valued. It's very low priming. It's like it's just not a high end tea for them.
It's the Velato.
Yeah, it's a very common tea. Like it's just a very common tea. So it's not as prized as like an oolong. Oolongs are very expensive, very high end. That's an oolong is something you'd drink if you're royalty. Someone who's got money. Whereas the PR is like your sort of everyman tea.
Interesting.
And that is different. I mean, that is like black tea, but filtered through leather, and it's got like an earthiness to it. I mean, it's like a Ometepe tobacco in a cup. Like it's very, very different than a traditional black tea for me.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So this actually comes from the Chinese Yunnan province, and the Chinese Yunnan province pretty much produces that's their product. You pick a Chinese tea, pretty good chance that it comes from the Yunnan province because that's where a lot of this tea is made. Again, this is a heavily fermented tea, and interestingly enough, the prime time for them to pick tea is spring. Spring is like tea season. You get your best teas or most highly prized teas from spring. You'll get the most character. The next best time is fall. That's when you're going to get tea that maybe doesn't have as much body. So to bring it back to tobacco, not as much body, not as much flavor characteristics, but a lot of strength. So you're getting a lot of quote-unquote nicotine-ish properties from the tea. And then from there it goes to summer. Summer would be sort of the least prized time for tea.
Interesting.
And that is different. I mean, that is not a tea that I think I would drink on a regular basis. I mean, it's a black tea, but it kind of lacks a lot of the characteristics of like an English breakfast that I would normally enjoy, where an English breakfast has some bright finishes to it. This has that sort of heavy leather, sort of thick, oily finish to it. Not a good pairing. You'd really need a peppery Maduro cigar, I think, to pair with this. The cigar you're smoking right now, I think would go really well with this tea.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, I don't drink and the interesting thing is that I'll say that I haven't drank a lot of straight Chinese black teas or red teas, but like the thing is you have, right?
Yeah.
Just like a cigar, even though right now, you mentioned English breakfast. Well, English breakfast tea is really a mixture of typically, and it can vary per manufacturer, but a combination of typically Kenyan black tea as well as Assam black teas, right? So it's kind of a mixture. And English breakfast is great. I was actually going to pick it because that's what I drink the most of, but I didn't want to be too cliche. But that's the thing. You've probably in certain teas that you've probably had Chinese or Assam or different teas, but you just weren't aware of it because a lot of the times they are mixed together to achieve a balance, much like in a cigar, right? Very rare to say I'm smoking a cigar that is only Seco from Corojo 99 grown in Nicaragua. Yeah, it exists, but to really get a lot of the complexity, much like cigars, get the complexity and get kind of that marrying together, a lot of teas are mixed together in different combinations with different regions to kind of achieve that.
And again, what we consider black tea in the West, they're highly oxidized teas, but they're not fermented teas. And what I'm drinking right now is a true Chinese black tea, which is heavily fermented, not necessarily oxidized. Which provides, I can see why this would be a digestif, because it is very heavy. Like it's, just to gross out our viewers, like you'd smoke a really heavy Maduro cigar. I mean, if you wanna take a good poop, you have a heavy, heavy Maduro cigar and a black coffee, and son, that is going to clear you out. And this is sort of along that same category where it's very full-bodied. I can see why this would aid with digestion because I mean this tea is just going to knock you right through.
Yep, exactly. And that's the thing is that typically caffeine in general has it, has the call it poop properties, but yeah, it's very interesting. I've got actually a bag of a couple of weird teas down here. I actually have a Russian tea, and then I have a straight kind of black tea that I need to drink from China, but maybe that'll be another episode.
Is that by chance the Russian Caravan?
Let me just see here.
I mean, I don't know if it is, but the Russian Caravan is kind of a mixture of the Lapsang, Souchong, an Oolong, black. Like it's a really interesting combination that I haven't had a chance to try, but I'm told.
Let me look here. It doesn't. I'm not necessarily getting the Lapsang smell in it. If you can keep talking, I can. Let me just look really quick.
So I'll talk a little bit about my fourth tea while you sniff this. So my fourth tea, which I haven't drank yet, truly is the sort of islet of teas. As Logan made the face earlier, this tea is very, very. It's going to separate you into two groups. You're either going to like it or you're going to hate it, and you're going to have very strong feelings about it because it smells like an islet. So it's wood smoke mixed with a little bit of briny salt. Filtered through a dirty sock, and I mean that's what it is. If you want a mouthful of campfire, that's the Souchong. I haven't tasted it yet, but that's what it smells like to me.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely very, I mean I don't know if you feel the surgeon the same way that I do on this, but as a smell before it's lit, kind of like the cold draw on your cigar, it's actually kind of pleasant. Like I like kind of that woodsy, hickory kind of mesquite kind of barbecue smell, that little bit of smoke, a little bit of like underlying salt. But I think that tea is most teas I think taste fairly similar to the way they smell. But for me, the Lapsang or whatever, once you actually drink it and it's ready to drink, I think it tastes completely different. I literally think it tastes like sweaty ball sack. Not that I've ever had sweaty ball sack in my mouth, but I would say it's just salty and it's just fucking gross.
And
I don't know how you drink it.
Well, I haven't drank it yet, so I mean I might not like it at all. When I smell it, it smells like it smells like someone took the bark of a tree, put it into a cup, smoked the shit out of it, and then added water. Like I mean that's what I imagine some woodcutter in the forest is brewing for his tea is this after sitting around a campfire, because I mean it's just you get the wood smoke, and I mean literally it smells like bark that's been smoked. And you know what, like I said, I'm a huge Islay Scotch fan, so maybe I'm gonna like this, but as you say, maybe I'll taste it and it'll just be sweaty ball sack, which sweaty ball sack for some people, not for this guy unless it's whiskey.
Yeah, I might like it,
Hey, different strokes for different folks.
Exactly.
We don't judge.
Yeah, I'm not here to judge. So what do you think? What did you think of it?
I'm gonna taste it right now. I was gonna ask you while I take a sip here. How is your pairings? Like, what is your preferences and pairings so far as you move down your tea line?
Well, I think the Derlaging doesn't work too well with the Ultra just because it's very, very mild and fragrant and floral, and this is just very peppery, very spicy, very kind of corally Nicaraguan. I don't think the pairing was very good, but I think Derlagings in general one of the better pairings that I've had, and I'm not a huge pairer by any means, but it is a Crowned Heads 4 Kicks with the Derlaging because it's a little bit lighter on the body and strength. That floral notes go really well with the kind of a slight Habano spice as well as some of the earth and leather that you get from there, and I think that pairing works really well. I picked the Earl Grey because I wanted to highlight how bad I think everything pairs with it because it really coats your tongue. But the best pairing that I have found I'm pretty niche in the cigars that I smoke, obviously. I like Nicaraguans. I like stuff with a lot of body and a lot of strength. And one of my favorite teas is the Ceylon tea, which is actually, if you guys don't know this, fun fact, kind of like in India when people say, "Oh, Bombay." Well, the British kind of name some cities, and then the Indian people kind of change the names back. So if you hear, "Oh, I went to Bombay," that's actually Mumbai. And if you went to Calcutta, it's actually Calcutta now, or Kolkata now. And then if you say, "Oh, I went to Madras," that's actually Chennai. Same thing. If you didn't know, Sri Lanka was actually a British province as well, or colonial province, and it was Ceylon. So if you see Ceylon, that is actually the old name referring to Sri Lanka, but obviously it was renamed Sri Lanka when they kind of, I mean, they've been an independent nation for a while, but and I think it was 71. So if you see Ceylon, Ceylon, you're going to see Sri Lankan, and it's very hard to kind of find. It's kind of an off the map tea, I think, even though it's a very small production in terms of how much they produce. I mean, obviously China and India, China, India, and Kenya like blow them out of the water, but Sri Lankan tea is one that I'm drinking right now. Is honestly one of my favorite teas that I have because it's much like kind of my cigars. Um, it's got a lot of that kind of. It's definitely fuller in body. It's definitely got a lot more to it. It's definitely got a lot more flavors I think that kind of work with, kind of this I typically like. It's definitely not a tea. I mean, for me, I can drink it definitely in the mornings, but it's a tea that might not necessarily work kind of in the mornings for most people. And it's definitely one that if you wanted to kind of mix with milk, it's a solid one to kind of mix with milk. But I think the Ultra and this actually go really, really well because you get a lot of the astringent where you can kind of take it off. It's slightly acidic, but let me just drink it while I'm talking here because I've been talking the whole time. I don't know. It's got just a very nice kind of, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know, man. I guess body to it, and I just freaking love it. And they're very specific on what they call Ceylon tea because it has to be 100% produced and packaged and made in Sri Lanka. So if you actually see a tea that is 100% Ceylon tea, you'll actually see the bag will have like a little lion with a little kind of dagger in his thing, and that's kind of like what we were talking about with the scotches and stuff, right? Where you can say that a scotch has to be XXX. So there's a lot of rules around it, but I think it's just a phenomenal tea.
Bam! You're listening to Sharing Our Pairings, episode 15, Tea Time Quite. Thanks very much for our listeners. Thanks very much to our podcast listeners, our YouTube subscribers. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Cigar Federation. Tune in Thursdays for Cigar Chat. I'm sitting here with our MFNCO, Logan, and sipping on a Chinese red tea, or described in the West as a black tea. Now, the black tea, as we talked about earlier, is the most strongly oxidized tea. It's sometimes referred to as a smoked tea, and this is for Chinese people. This is a very Western tea. They don't really drink this a lot. This is we talk about primings. This is the fourth and fifth leaves of priming, so it's a very, very low level priming, least desirable. But it is also one of the oldest teas. This tea actually dates back to right around the time when they were doing green tea. Smoked black tea or red tea, if it's Chinese, is one of the older teas. And you know what? I actually kind of like this. This is probably because I like the Ale whiskeys. It's interesting. I mean, it is very woody. It's got that mesquite flavor going on. I think if I were to steep it longer, this would not be good. But my girlfriend has done a great job. Name drop of name drop. Very, very good. Very woody, very, very smoky. Again, we kind of moved out of the comfort zone. I think of this Herrera Esteli Lonsdale, which is an excellent cigar, but goes really well with the lighter tea, the green tea. I think as you're doing, I think if you're going to do a black tea, you really need to kick it up. You need a heavier cigar, more body, more pepper. Otherwise, the tea is just going to run right over it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that I like about let me just pull it back up here. But with the Sri Lankan tea, is it's got a really, really nice kind of a fresh kind of aroma to it. It's just very a bright tea, and it just got this really kind of tangy thing about it. I don't know. I mean, I really like it. I mean, I think there's a lot of teas out there, And there's what I would recommend. I mean, if you want to get into teas, I used to be kind of a big coffee drinker, not because I liked coffee, but I liked it for obviously the caffeine effects, and I didn't want to drink a Code Red at 6:30 in the morning on my commute to work. And after being introduced to teas, that's what I have in the morning. Especially someone like you that lives up in the fucking Arctic, Surgeon, having a nice warm cup of tea it's kind of nice to wake up to. But what I would tell you is that if you're wanting to get more into teas and experiment, there's a lot of different websites that'll sell kind of loose leaf tea. I went off Amazon and bought my little guy. It was like $10, and just kind of get a little water warmer, a coffee pot or whatever, and warm up your water, and just get little samples. A lot of sites sell little sample packs. You don't have to go deep with 3-5 ounces like I've got, or even more. Just get a little sample that makes, say, 10 cups, and then just kind of play around with it. It's one of those things that I like, and I think the reason I'm drawn to tea is much like cigars, that it's a thing that there's very many different varieties and many different companies. I guess like beer and everything else, but you can get into, and everything's a little bit different, and when you'll find kind of what you gravitate to and what you gravitate, I guess kind of against. So, I don't know.
And my teas are actually brought today by David's Tea. Now, David's Tea plus my wallet, or in this case, my girlfriend's wallet. David's Tea does almost exclusively loose leaf tea. They have a ridiculous selection. I mean, we went down there, and there's like 100 and some odd teas to choose from. What's nice is they have samples. You can get a sample. You can smell it. So it gives a good variety. And as we said earlier, unless you're a Neanderthal, loose leaf is the way to go. Don't be a hoser.
Yeah. Well, now that we're getting towards the end. We still got a few minutes. Tea is actually, I think, I know with you, Surgeon, your coffee stuff, you've got all types of damn apparatuses to make coffee, and it can get very expensive. The good thing about teas is that and I'm a cheap bastard by nature, is it's cheaper to get into, because coffee is expensive, but you have to get your press and all this crap. Really, all you need for tea is something to boil water in, and then something like this. I've used this before. You can get these off Amazon pretty cheap, the little balls. They have a string on them, and you put your loose leaf in and dip them. I personally don't like those because what? Balls! Because ballsack. I hate it, because what'll happen is it's hard to get the lid off. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is. You make a nice cup of tea and you are trying to either get the lid on or off, and you put it in and it falls apart. I really like my guy off Amazon. He works very well, but it's a pretty inexpensive hobby to get into. You can get samples off everything, but tea is pretty inexpensive. I mean, like when you're talking just on a per cup basis, you're probably talking for like English breakfast and stuff. Just the normal range, 5 to 10 cents a cup. But I want to talk about one of the most expensive teas, and I haven't had a chance to do, but I just find it very, very, very interesting. It's actually called Keeman's Encore, or Encore. Actually, it is Encore, but it's about 50 cents a cup. But for tea, is fucking ridiculous. And it's a really, really famous black tea, and it comes from the Anuri province, and it's one of the most famous black teas, and it has a very interesting flavors, where it actually has almost kind of like a fiery, almost kind of that smoky that you were talking about, almost malty kind of flavoring to it, and has a little bit of almost kind of like a honey sweetness, and it's very, very, very expensive tea, but it is, from what I understand, I have not had it, but one of the more expensive but a very interesting tea, and you can actually do that. There's a lot of, just like anything, like cigars, right? I mean, you can get a Nicaraguan Puro, but are you getting a Nicaraguan Puro using Corojo 99 grown by Aganorsa in Esteli, right? So you can go start very simple and then work your way up to very, very niche teas within a segment, which I really like. And even at 50 cents a cup, it's still not completely ridiculous,
Now, you can get pretty crazy with teas, just like you can with coffees. I mean, I've seen the setups for fancy coffee pots that cost a couple $100. And the interesting thing with a not a coffee pot, a teapot, pardon me, with a teapot, because with expensive teapots, they are porous. And you really only want to brew one type of tea in that teapot, because the characters of that tea end up infusing that pot. And this is a desirable characteristic. You have a teapot. You wash it with water, but you don't use soap. You lightly clean it, and over time, this teapot imbues additional characteristics to the tea. So you can do it really cheap, and you can also get pretty crazy with the apparatuses. And you can spend a lot of money, as you say, with the tea at 50 cents a cup. I mean, I think with this, it was either the Souchong or the Puer, a bag of this, which was only, I don't remember how many grams or freedom units.
How many ounces? Do you remember?
Yes, it was a very small amount, and it ended up costing like $18 or $20 for a very small bag. Yeah, it was expensive. So you can get pretty crazy.
Well, and the other thing about tea that most people don't know is that once you kind of, and I don't know, and I'm not a coffee expert, so I might be speaking out of turn here, but once you have your coffee and you percolate or you press or you do whatever, it's pretty much over. You throw those grounds away. Well, with tea, if you've got, your little balls, or you've got your little man or whatever, you can actually make several cups off of one. Do you know what I mean? You can actually make several, and it's kind of interesting. I've done that a few times when I've ran out of tea bags and I, wanted to have several cups of coffee during the day. But you can actually use it up to, and it kind of depends, right? You can use it. I'm trying to remember the name of how they say it, but anyways, you can actually do it. Use that several different times, and use it for several different word uses of infusions, right? But anywhere from 3 to 4 times, and it's kind of interesting because the more and more you do it, the less and less nuance and flavors that come out. So it's kind of just an interesting thing to do, and I'll do that occasionally as well.
So I would definitely say I've enjoyed this show. Definitely ranks among my top shows for pairings that I personally enjoyed.
Because I'm here.
You're here. We back to attack with tea knowledge, and for the Hura Esteli, absolutely the oolong was a great pairing. The Genmatcha green tea was a great pairing. If you're going to go with a Puer or a Souchong, got to have a fuller-bodied cigar. Otherwise, it's just going to run right over the cigar. But all of these pairings, all of these teas were quite enjoyable, and I look forward to doing a Redux show in the near future.
Yeah, dude. Next time we'll do it, what we'll do is we'll get I've got a whole shizer ton of loose tea, and I hopefully Canada, I know they get crazy about sending up beer and cigars, but hopefully, well, they probably will because it's an agricultural product, I guess. But next time I'll send you a bunch of loose teas, and we'll drink the same thing, maybe, and we'll just do different cigars. But yeah, we'll definitely do another tea show. I think it's one of those pairings, yes, a lot of people drink, but not everyone drinks, right? And I personally don't recommend pairing. You can pair it with a soda and stuff, and it's fine. But there's limited amount of beverages, at least in my head, that aren't alcoholic that you can pair cigars with that I think work as well as teas. And so, or maybe I'm wrong. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, Surgeon. Do you disagree?
No, you know what? I think I'm on the same page with you now because, like you say, there's so many different types of tea. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teas, and there's like it's like tobacco. I mean, you can do a lot of crazy stuff blending a cigar. You can do a lot of crazy stuff blending tea, and I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to drink. You get a category of tea, and within that category, you get 50 different flavors out of it.
Exactly.
So make sure to. So go ahead, brother.
Go ahead, brother. I was saying, so Surgeon, do your thing.
So, good show, man. And I think everyone needs to make sure they tune in next Thursday, November 13th, for the Maya Selva. I'm butchering that. Maya Selva show, Thursday, November 13th. Appreciate everyone tuning in to Sharing Our Pairings, episode 15. We'll be back in a couple weeks. We're going to take a little bit of a week break here. As I get buried under presumably 3 to 5 inches of snow, and for our southern brothers there, somewhere in the neighborhood of a high, this is our high, of 15 degrees. So it's going to get pretty frosty.
It's going to get cold.
In the show on Wednesday. It's very, very cold. In that weather, I can't really smoke because, first of all, I'm going to freeze.
Pointless.
And second of all, a beautiful cigar like this, if I lit this up in that weather, you're going to see this wrapper crack immediately. Going to very tough to keep it lit. It's not a good scene at all.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll be back. We're going to figure out how we're going to continue this rolling because obviously I know that a lot of people love this show, and I know Surgeon and his other co-hosts, like Rob or Aaron from Blind Man's Puff love doing it. So we'll figure out how we do it. So when you guys are watching this on Wednesday, guess what, motherfuckers? This was recorded, you assholes. You didn't even know it, did you? Yep, it was pre-recorded, you dumb fuckers. Anyway, not that they care. Not that they care. But let's sign off, Surgeon, and then I'll promise we'll come back and do another tea show for sure.
So thanks again to our live listeners, quote-unquote live listeners. Thanks for our podcast listeners. You've been listening to Sharing Our Pairings episode 15, Tea Time, with our MFNCO, Logan. As we always say, drink less, drink better. Pour some teas. Let us know what you think. Thanks very much.
Bye, guys.